I typically avoid economics and money as a topic in general to tackle because I find it very boring and dry. But when something as influential and unique ideas as is presented in this essay comes along, I don't mind it at all. There is a fair bit of philosophy, there's a fair bit of politics and the influence of it on economy, and many other such broader topics on which this essay comments, and all of these are very, very insightful. It talks about centralized control versus personal liberty. Anyway, instead of throwing words out there, let me just try to explain the problem he's trying to solve. The core idea being that let's assume the economic order that we are living by today. Would that be better managed by someone who knows everything? Imagine a person who has all the knowledge in the world. Would it be better if he made decisions for you? Or, as is the case today, every individual has the opportunity, as based on his knowledge, which might be specialized and very specific to a particular place he's living in, or the time or milieu in which he was born. All of these factors influence which stocks we invest in, for example, or how we spend our money. So, should that decision be decided by a central authority that knows everything, or by someone who is localized at an individual level? And Haig claims that first, this centralized authority cannot be accurate at all, and second, that the individual knows so much more about the localized conditions that cannot be factored into an algorithm that will predict very specific things. The cost of tissue paper in an area might fluctuate based on its supply and demand and many other factors, the kinds of people who are living there, their ages, their preferences, and so many other factors, the weather, for example, that you cannot predict at a global scale. So, what is the argument that Hayek is making? Hayek is basically saying that every individual has specialized knowledge, decentralized knowledge that allows him that specific uniqueness to him that cannot be controlled by a centralized authority, let's say the banks or some other government body, and that government bodies will fail even if they try to impose, let's say, some price restrictions in the free market. That is why centralized authorities like the banking institutions, the Federal Reserve, for example, they are there only to give direction or to enable free trade and ensure that things like legislation, contracts are upheld. They cannot control the specific pricing of products or the demand and supply of production itself. So, very important again that we keep in mind that he's arguing for personal freedom and personal liberty, not because he believes in the libertarian view of things, but just because it's a bad system. And he also claims later in the essay that we didn't come up with the price system or the barter system. It's something that evolved naturally, and it happens to be the perfect solution for this problem. And because a particular single mind didn't come up with this brilliant system, we don't appreciate it enough in our everyday lives. But just imagine the kind of things that the market has to decide before it sets on a price for a certain product. Let's take the example of toilet paper or tissue papers, as I just said. When the market decides a price for that toilet paper, it takes into account so many different things. What the median income level of that particular community is, weather, geography, political relations with, let's say, you are importing that particular product, taxes. Again, there is a whole bunch of politics being played behind it about production itself, labor costs. But the end consumer, which is you and I, don't have to worry about the supply chain at all, right? We just are looking at the price that we are paying, let's say $5. That's all I have to worry about. My job gives me $5. I spend it on toilet paper. That's it. That's the entire transaction between consumer and producer. But setting that price or using the price as a signal for scarcity or supply and demand is the perfect way to encapsulate all of these different specialized knowledges into one thing, and that is brilliant. Let's take a localized case. Let's say the weather tells that there is a snowstorm incoming tomorrow or a hurricane. We know that no one would be roaming about tomorrow or the next week. So what do people do? They automatically, because the availability of toilet paper is less, the price will surge. They will be okay paying $15 for something that cost $5. People will instinctively start hoarding, and those people who do have the little bit of toilet paper left, they will automatically adjust their behavior because the price of toilet paper is so high. They will know to conserve the little toilet paper they have. The government will not have to mandate this, right? That would be a sin if you are living in the free world and the free markets, for the government to say that you cannot buy toilet paper, or that you are barred from purchasing more than one toilet paper. You can't do that in a free market. So what do? The price automatically increases without any government intervention. And again, we can talk about the ethics of that and ethics of hoarders who capture sensitive items and then sell in the back market for a multiple of the initial cost price. But anyway, the point being that there was we are using human psychology basically, and thousands of years of evolution to get to this point of economic theory and economic order, where price is such a significant and the only indicator of localized, specialized knowledge that fluctuates with time and conditions, and it takes a huge burden out of these economic regulators around us. So we are lucky to be in this situation for sure. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Mycroft Holmes. Now, bear with me, this is a weird comparison, I'll give you that. But if you remember how he is described in the books by Conan Doyle, you'll know that Mycroft is almost an all knowing entity, right? He knows a lot of geopolitics. He reads a lot of newspapers from all different kinds of people, reports. He knows a lot basically about many different things, geopolitics wise, political connections, the state of wars happening across the world. So basically, he can, for example, take a relationship between France and Belgium, use it to make a decision in America based on something the ambassador of France said. So something like that, like very specific, specialized knowledge of all different kinds is with Mycroft. And that's what Hayek argues is not a possibility in our world today. An entity that knows everything still won't be able to keep up with the constantly changing, distributed local knowledge of the individual. So we have to prioritize that knowledge of the individual rather than going behind an all-knowing entity and someone like a jack of all trades who can give advice on a very broad basis. That is good for its own regard if I want a general direction to go in, but it cannot take into account the distributed local knowledge of the individual. So always keep the individual in mind when you're making decisions. And Hayek also argues for personal liberty and personal freedom in how I spend money. He says that, let's say I'm a shopkeeper, I should be allowed to charge a specific price for a product based on what I observe in my immediate locality. And only then will my knowledge, my individual knowledge, be useful, right? If I go by what my competitors in a different state, neighboring state are doing, let's say, what's the use of being an individual with a mind with my specialized knowledge? Maybe I know something about a specific semiconductor being used in a product is going to be scarce in the coming month, and I raise the prices for that product right now. I can influence, using the price system, the buying habits of the consumer. That is the purpose of the price being there and the purpose of having specialized knowledge. So use that to your advantage. We are already doing this to some extent in when we purchase stocks as a consumer. So me as a person, there'll be 1,000 factors going into which stock I buy next. My decision will depend on, least of all, let's say, my upbringing, my values, the cost of the stock to begin with, what the company is doing, how I see what the company is doing. So all of these factors are put into where I'm spending my money. So that is the personal freedom I get from the system that we are living in. So that should be preserved instead of listening to a centralized government authority telling me that the broad direction we are going in is renewable energy, so invest in those stocks. Because that doesn't take into account my specialized knowledge of the field and my experiences. And we have to value that above all. All right, so this was my very brief understanding of the essay. I'm sure there is a lot more that went over my head, but I did enjoy reading this essay, and so should you. Thank you for listening.